Hello, and welcome to EllieMD's live educational series. I am Brenda, today's host, and EllieMD's social media manager. We're so glad you're here as we continue our mission to help people live healthier, longer lives. At EllieMD, we go beyond telehealth. We're building a community rooted in education, innovation, and personalized support to empower your wellness journey. Today, we're excited to welcome Courtney, a passionate health optimization specialist who blends science and strategy to help people take control of their health. Courtney works with Rise Athletic Performance and brings a unique background in chemistry and physiology to her practice. Her expertise spans nutrition, exercise, supplementation, and lifestyle, combined with a deep understanding of biochemistry and human performance. That's amazing. What truly sets Courtney apart is her specialized focus on peptide therapy. She's known for translating complex science into real-world actionable steps that support hormone health, recovery, longevity, and body composition goals. Whether you're new to peptides or exploring how to optimize your routine, Courtney's insight helps make personalized protocols approachable and effective. So, Courtney, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here with all of you.
We're so glad to have you with us today. So, let's, can you share a little bit more about yourself? So, I know I gave a quick bio, but
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, hi, my name is Courtney. I am a health optimization specialist. I work with a company called Rise Athletic Performance. And the goal at Rise Athletic Performance is to go beyond athletic performance and to help people build sustainable habits to optimize their health through wellness practices, lifestyle changes, nutrition, and movement. And then where I have taken that a step further is I have brought in the aspect of utilizing peptide therapy and supplementation therapy to better support optimization for people looking to choose anything from overall longevity, injury repair and healing, um, skin, hair, nail aesthetic goals, weight loss support. Really, if there is a specific need, there is a peptide that has some kind of approach and application, and I have helped the company to develop that niche a little bit more so that we can help more people and help people reach their goals.
it's amazing. Now, let's start with the foundation. There's a lot of people who are familiar with peptides, and some who are joining the call because they're interested in them. So, for anyone who's new to peptides or just is starting to explore, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. And I know I was at first. So, let's start with the basics. What exactly are peptides and how do they work in the body?
Absolutely. So when we think of peptides, we it's a very scientific word. It's what does that mean? Peptides are short chains of amino acids. What's an amino acid? An amino acid is a a building block. And if we look at the the building blocks of life, let's break it all the way down. So we have our amino acids. Those amino acids build our peptides. Our peptides then build our proteins. So we take let's backtrack. We got our protein. We know what a protein is. That's what builds our tissues. Those build our organs. Those build our organisms and our organ systems, and those build our organisms. So when we look at what a peptide it is that second foundational block of life and how we utilize them as a supplemental aspect or as a tool is those short chains of amino acids that we're now using are now these signaling molecules. And we have on our cells these receptors, and these receptors are almost like docking ports. And these peptides have a very specific shape, a very specific structure, and those ports on those cells kind of they send out these little beacons and they're like, hey peptide, I'm over here, I'm over here, I'm over here. That peptide then docks into that signaling port, and then that is what creates a biological process in that cell. So they are kind of that initial cascade of how we can create biological function. That includes things like releasing hormones, decreasing inflammation, or starting the inflammatory process to help with tissue repair, helping fat metabolism. It's peptides are that second building block of life, but they're also what start cells to be able to perform their functions and to also talk to each other. So they are both a macro and a micro level molecule that we're talking about here.
That's amazing. And I've heard of people using peptides for different reasons, from inflammation to weight loss. So, what makes peptide therapy different from other supplements or medications?
Absolutely, it's a great question. So this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with that idea of being of our cells being receptors and having these docking stations. When we are talking about a medication or a supplement in the traditional sense, we're talking about a very broad spectrum idea. Where if we were to talk about somebody taking ibuprofen, that is a very macro level approach to decreasing inflammation. Versus if we're going to talk about a peptide source of decreasing inflammation, we're talking about sending a peptide to go directly to the source of that inflammation, to go to that cell, to dock onto that cell, and to start a very, very specific cascade of processes. So we're taking out the excess. We're really focusing in on exactly what's going on. A lot of there's a term that's thrown around a lot right now called, you probably have heard it, people talking about the root cause. We want to find the root cause of the issue. What's the root cause of your digestive upset? What's the root cause of your inflammation? And peptides really help get to that root cause, that very basement layer of how can we fix this versus looking at a top-down approach. We're going from the bottom up.
I love that we can use, and we've just been able to come to that point where we can use peptide therapy to get to those underlying issues. So, on that, and I know that you work with clients as well, who would be an ideal candidate for peptide therapy?
Gosh, that is a hard question to answer and a very easy one all at the same time. Um, Very easy to answer because many people are candidates for peptide therapy. Peptides are a very broad spectrum. Because of their specificity, there is a peptide for pretty much everything. So if you have a goal in mind, or if you have an ailment that is causing you some kind of distress, there is most likely a peptide that you can be paired with that you would see great benefit from utilizing. It's hard to say who would be a best candidate for peptides for kind of the same reason, because there is so much specificity, and you want to when we're looking at peptides, and I think that this is a mistake that a lot of people make when starting out their journeys with peptide therapy, is if we're looking at health and wellness as a pyramid, what's the foundation of that pyramid? Nutrition, movement, and recovery. Those are always going to be the hallmarks of your successes. If you are if you replace that foundational layer with supplementation, with peptides, now we've inverted that pyramid. So the person that's the best candidate for peptide therapy is going to be the person that has built that foundation of, they've addressed their movement, they're in line with their nutrition goals, they're recovering well, and they need that extra step. Or they're falling into a little bit of a rut. They're having an issue with their recovery. They're having an issue with adhering to a nutrition plan. they're having a hard time recovering from movement or building muscle because of a hormonal imbalance. Now let's look at bringing those peptides in. So the best person to utilize peptides is anybody who is needing that extra little boost to take the next step in their longevity journey, in their health and wellness journey, but also the person that has already addressed those root foundational pillars that are going to be really the support of their overall health and wellness.
I love that. And there's so many peptides out there, and from just longevity to weight loss. So I definitely agree. There's a little bit of something for everyone. Um, Going into that a little, someone in our audience, Lisa, asks if you can explain why we have to cycle off certain peptides for a period of time when it's appropriate.
Absolutely. It's a great question because oh, I'm taking this peptide. It makes me feel so good. I don't want to get off of it. I want to keep this momentum moving. And it's easy to fall into that trap. But when we're, again, let's take it back to how these peptides work. They work by docking on to receptors on our cells. And we want to make sure that while we're supplementing safely and in a way that allows those cells to what is called desensitize. So you can think about the desensitization process like something gets docked onto a receptor, and the natural biological process of that is that there is going to be an undocking of that so that there can be a new stimulus so that a cell can say, okay, this peptide, this signaling molecule has done its job. We're good. We don't need it anymore. It undocks. We move on with our life, and then it goes, okay, we need it again. That peptide comes back. If we're constantly saturating those receptors with signaling molecules, eventually it's like it's like leaving the lights on all day. Eventually, those light bulbs are going to burn out. So when we leave the house, we got to turn the lights off. When our we have to support our natural biological processes still to create that desensitization so that when we do re-implement those substances, those supplements, those peptides, whatever it may be, that those lights are still going as bright as we want and we need them to.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, I have been such a huge fan of my NAD, and it's so hard to part away from it for those 6 to 8 weeks. And once it's back, time to cycle on it. It's the best week of ever.
So much sweeter when it comes back.
Yes, I love that. So now that we understand what peptides are and how they function, let's talk about something that comes up pretty frequently in the community, which is hormones. Whether it's low energy, disrupted sleep, or weight fluctuations, hormones play a huge role in how we feel each day. So how do peptides fit into that picture? How can peptides support hormone balance in both men and women, especially as they age?
Absolutely. So hormones are hormones and peptides are really our best friends with each other. And peptides are going to be there are certain peptides that can stimulate the body to produce more of its natural hormone production. So this is where peptides and exogenous hormone supplementation differ. When we are thinking about taking HRT, for example, hormone replacement therapy, where we are taking bioidentical hormone sources and introducing that to our body, we are just giving that to our body. Versus when we use a peptide, we are telling our body, hey, make more of this. And then it has to go through the biological cascade process of making that hormone. So instead of just going right to the end result, we're starting at the top. Um, there's we can look at things like stimulating more growth hormone, testosterone, LH and FSH, which are going to be essential for fertility in both men and women. That's going to be supporting ovulation in women and also supporting sperm production in men. It's going when looking a lot at the hypothalamic pituitary axis and having the adrenals to make more sex hormone. And when we're looking at peptides, we're looking at telling our body to make more of that hormone instead of just adding that hormone to the mix. The issue that we fall into with peptides here is, I shouldn't say the issue, the potential speed bump that we run into here is there is a point where once the lemon has been squeezed, it's a hard time. You're going to have a hard time getting juice from it, regardless of how much you try and stimulate the production to happen. So that this is where you have to take a more functional one-on-one approach with people, and you can't just say you're gonna take this for this long at this much and call it a day, and you're gonna have a broad spectrum result. This is where the really individualized and customization of peptide protocols becomes absolutely essential for success.
And I love that you touch on HRT. How do peptides work alongside other hormone therapies like HRT?
Absolutely. So, like I said, they're very, very complementary of one another. While HRT is providing that direct hormonal replacement, as I was saying, peptides are going to signal the body to function better independently from that HRT. So this could result in needing a less significant dosage of HRT. This can help with transitioning off of HRT if that's an appropriate approach. This can help people who um, are maybe transitioning off of things like birth control, hormonal birth control, and maybe aren't a candidate for full-fledged hormonal replacement therapy, but they're lacking in hormone production. So it can be there's great synergy between using the two together, but it can also be a a instead of being a 1 plus 1 equals 2 situation, it could be a 1 plus 2 equals 4 situation. And you can get some extra added benefit from using peptides along HRT because you can lower the dosage, mitigate side effects that you might see from HRT, and you also can kind of fine tune because the peptides are so specific. You can you can kind of fine tune and pick and choose some of those very, very specific benefits from peptides and utilize those alongside HRT.
And taking a small step back before someone is even on some type of HRT, what are some key signs of hormone imbalance that maybe an individual can look for that
Absolutely.
might be trying to do some type of peptide therapy?
Absolutely. So, when we're looking at symptoms, things that you're going to experience as a person, fatigue, mood swings, anxiety, poor sleep, low libido, weight gains, especially in the abdominal area, poor cognition and brain fog. If you feel like no matter how much you sleep, no matter how much you eat, no matter how much you're exercising, you can't wake up, that is a really good indicator that there is something deeper going on. If you are premenopausal, if you're still experiencing normal cycles and you have extreme PMS, PMDD, if you're experiencing heavy bleeding, if your experience around hormonal fluctuation, time, your time of the month, ovulation, if it is unbearable for you, there is a good chance that there is some type of hormonal imbalance going on. Now, it's important when I say that that we're not just going off of symptoms because they're when we look at a case, it's important to look at it from both a subjective matter, how are you feeling, but also objectively, getting your labs drawn, getting a full hormone panel tested, and looking at those values in an optimal perspective versus saying, yeah, you're in the reference range because that reference range is just a population average, a population that includes people who are sick, healthy, overweight, underweight, young, old, perimenopause, premenopause, postmenopause, all lumped together and given an average value. So average and optimal are not the same. So making sure that we're looking at a combination of objective blood work, or Dutch panels or some type of lab value alongside how are you feeling? Are you experiencing debilitating hormonal related symptoms? Because positively no reason that your life should be debilitating.
I love that. With your clients, with any that have been using peptides, what kind of results have you seen that peptides have helped with their symptoms of perimenopause or low testosterone?
Absolutely. So specifically on the hormonal side of things, um, dealing a lot with, hey, I started HRT and it's going really well, but I'm still seeing this. This symptom keeps popping up for me. I'm still having hot flashes. I am still experiencing vaginal dryness. My libido is not where it should be. I am still experiencing weight fluctuations. Those are really common symptoms that I could, those four are ones that continue to pop up for me. And like I said, because those peptides have such high specificity, being able to address those concerns as they come up individually instead of just saying, this is going to help everything a little bit, saying, here's something that's going to help this one thing tremendously. So I've been able to really help women and men for whatever reason, they have their inner workings are much simpler than women's, and addressing their hormonal concerns is a lot less complicated. So, particularly when I'm speaking about a lot of my anecdotal times working with clients, they are females, and that's simply just because most of the time the people who are experiencing hormonal imbalances do happen to be female. Not saying that it can't happen for the males too, and there are ways to utilize peptide therapy for that, but for the most part, it is primarily female. But I've been able to really help a lot of women to pinpoint those symptoms that they're still experiencing while using HRT and really address those things so that they are having normal libido, that when they are having intercourse, they're not experiencing pain from vaginal dryness, not because they're using an extra tool or a lubricant, but because their body is just working properly.
I love that. And what kind of peptides would you recommend for hormonal imbalances? And we had a question also from Becky that kind of ties in. What are peptides that can help support thyroid function?
Thyroid function is a great question. For talking about hormones, and then I'll get into thyroid for hormonal imbalances, specifically thymulin and GHK-Cu are going to be incredible, supporting adrenal and ovarian resilience overall. PT 141 is absolutely incredible for libido, sexual function, especially around perimenopausal time. Implementing oxytocin for mood, for bonding, for libido, and also kisspeptin is also incredible for supporting ovulation and estrogen support. For the thyroid in specific, the thyroid is really going to be a much deeper conversation, just like hormones and or just like sex hormones. Your thyroid is a gland, and that gland produces hormone. And depending on what we are trying to achieve by peptide therapy, do we have an overactive thyroid? Are we seeing hyperthyroidism, where we might be seeing instances of Graves' disease-like symptoms? Are we seeing hypothyroidism? Are we seeing, symptoms associated with Hashimoto's disease and inflammation attached to that? Are we seeing high thyroid stimulating hormone, thyroid peroxidase, antibodies? And are we seeing the thyroid being impacted by systemic bodily inflammation? So those cases are going to depend, or are going to change your course of treatment. Um, Overall, when I see people dealing with wanting to utilize thyroid or peptides for thyroid support, I'm usually looking at decreasing systemic body inflammation. So looking at things like injectable GHKCU, which is copper peptide, BPC 157, which is going to be a body protective compound, which is going to be great for healing and inflammation. Potentially looking at TB 500, potentially looking at some mitochondrial peptides like SS31, might be looking at something like an LL37 for an immune function, immune response. But it really depends on what are we trying to accomplish here, and also what's the rest of your health look like. It's very easy to get this very pinhole approach and go, I need to fix this. And we forget that we aren't this. We're a whole person. And the body works as a system. So keying in on a very, very detailed aspect of one thing and forgetting the rest of the body, we need to make sure that we're looking at everything in a whole body approach.
hmm I know, and I love that. Thank you for sharing all of those peptides. I haven't started GHKCU, but I didn't actually know about the hormonal part. I just know it's like very great for skin. So that's really good to know. And
It is
if
phenomenal.
yeah, yeah. And even with we have the Thrill pill. I don't know if you checked out our catalog, but that has three. So it has PT141, oxytocin, and tadalafil. So you get all of those three amazing peptides in this one little
Yes, that would
cookie.
be absolutely phenomenal. Tadalafil, for those of you on the call that aren't familiar with it. Tadalafil is usually associated with male needs and erectile dysfunction. And it works by increasing blood flow. It's a vasodilator, so it increases the size of your blood vessels to allow for more blood flow. And that includes blood flow to erogenous zones like the vagina, the nipples, and can definitely help with increasing those pleasure centers in combination with oxytocin and PT141. A really great tool.
Right. And we had a really good, interesting question come in from Cynthia. I think there's also a good amount of misinformation out there in regards to peptides, and I've seen this one float around in regards to BPC. So she would like to start BPC, but she has concerns about cancer risks. So she's read that it could trigger dormant cancer cells. Is that a real risk?
So I can't come on here and tell you that it's not a risk, because it is. But what I can come on and tell you is BPC 157. I hear about it a lot also with the growth hormone releasing peptides. So anything that ends in like alin, tesamorelin, sermorelin, ipamorelin, hexamorelin, that class of peptides. Also IGF 1. Also, I hear a lot about the cancer risk, melanotan, hear a lot about the cancer risk. Peptides are not going to cause cancer. It's if there is a pre-existing cancer, and for the most part, most people have cancer in their bodies. Our bodies are just equipped to deal with those mutated cells, to go through programmed cell suicide, to get rid of those cells through autophagy and through normal cellular processes. So it's not like we're all walking around white as snow with no dormant cancer cells in our body. So if there was a situation where cancer were to start to metastasize or to mutate and it were to become a significant risk. If you add in a peptide like BPC-157, BPC-157 is going to increase what's called angiogenesis, which is blood cell formation. If you have more blood, you have more movement, more cellular nutrients being uptake, waste being removed. There's just more stuff going on. If you have that kind of movement and you have a pre-existing cancer cell, yes, those two in combination, you could exacerbate the rate at which that cancer could be metastasizing. This is there's no hard and fast data saying if you take BPC 157, you're going to increase your risk of by this percentage. That's not what I'm saying at all. But from an educator standpoint, that is a risk that you have to assume if you do want to use it. And like I said, it's not going to cause anything, but there is the chance that if there is something pre-existing, then that is a chance that you would incur. But there's also a chance that the sky could fall tomorrow. So what's your level of risk that you feel comfortable with taking? And are you more would you rather sit in whatever the ailment is that you're sitting in, that you're looking at using BPC 157 for, testosterone for, whatever the peptide that you're looking at, are you willing to not take that because you are concerned or are more concerned about the risk of cancer? Or are you more willing to say, I want to heal my sprained ankle or I want to fix my tennis elbow, and you can and that has a greater benefit for you than not. So it's a personal risk, just like taking anything else. There's always going to be a risk involved with taking anything. But you have to decide that for yourself, but it's not going to cause cancer.
Thank you for sharing that. And that kind of leads us into our another big question. So, where can someone start? There's so many peptides with so many benefits. So, how can someone know what's right for them or if they're even using them effectively?
Absolutely. So there is a ton of peptides out there, and there's new information, it seems like, every week on what's best and what cycle and who needs this and what needs what and how to, and it's a lot. It's a lot from somebody who has a background in chemistry and anatomy and physiology to stay up on top of. Um, the safest route that I will always recommend people going about is working with somebody who knows what they're talking about. Um, Peptides are just because you can get them online, just because you have an amazing resource like EllieMD, just because you have the accessibility to them does not mean you have the skill set to use them properly and to use them safely. There is just because there is an availability of them does not mean that they are that they can't that you can't cause yourself to potentially have some adverse effects, to not be mitigating side effects appropriately, to be dosing properly. These are all things that require guidance, and I could not recommend more working with somebody to best optimize a protocol. There's also, like you said, there's a lot of peptides out there, and some of those peptides do really similar things. And they're just because, oh, this increases uh, growth hormone in my body. Oh, and so does this one, and so does this one. I'm going to take all three of them and I'm going to have the most amount of growth hormone out of anybody on my block. No. 1 plus 1 plus 1 doesn't always equal 3. 1 plus 1 plus 1 might equal 0. And then you get done with a 12-week protocol and you're like, where the heck is all my growth hormone? I thought I was going to see all these amazing effects. I thought I was going to have all these amazing results. I don't see a difference. And I took all three. So, working with somebody who knows what they're talking about, who can help you, and who is also educated to walk you through the nuances of it, because what's best for you might not be best for your best friend, and might be what might be best for you might be might be a completely different protocol, even though you guys have the same goals. So, looking at it from a customized approach, looking at it from a personalized approach, and looking at it from an educated approach are always going to be the precedent for me. This is something that just because you can doesn't mean you should. And if you're going to spend the money on your health and wellness, invest it wisely and do it appropriately and do it safely.
Thank you for sharing that. And since you've worked with so many clients, what are common mistakes that you see when people are starting peptides?
Yeah.
You mentioned incorrect dosing, and I think that's a really common
Yes.
mistake.
Incorrect dosing is something that I see a lot of. Um, People will come to me in various stages of their peptides journey. People will say, "Hey, I want to start peptides for the first time." People will say, "Hey, I'm taking this right now and I want to get involved." And people will say, "Hey, I just tried this cycle. I wasn't really a huge fan, but I think I might want to try what's next." So I'll work with people across the board, and the amount of times where I'll ask somebody, "Okay, so you were taking X peptide. What was your dose?" And they give me what the amount that they were injecting. I'm like, okay, that's great. How much was in there? Because the concentration of what's in your syringe could be very different, but it could be the same volume as something else because of the concentration differences. So understanding dosing is very important. Understanding concentration is very important. But I mentioned this earlier, having that foundation of what is of of having a nutrition plan in place, having a movement plan in place, having a recovery plan in place, and using peptides to optimize those things instead of replace those things. Because at the end of the day, those are going to be our foundation blocks. So not understanding dosing, not having a good structure in place, and then the redundancy epidemic, I will call it, of 1 plus 1 sometimes equals 2, sometimes it equals 0, though. And trying to work out your own protocol, I see a lot more redundancy than is necessary. And then lastly is seeing inappropriate protocols for people based on things like their age or their health markers. Because, oh, this worked for my friend, or this worked for my sister-in-law, or I'm going to try this exact same protocol, and you guys don't have the same exact bodies. So those would be my biggest call outs that I see the most often.
And I love that you talk about having strategies in place and plans because the way I see peptides is that they're tools. You know, peptides don't work in a vacuum. They really shine when they're integrated into a thoughtful wellness routine. So let's talk into our next topic, which is fitness. So let's talk about how peptides can work alongside fitness, nutrition, and daily habits to support that long-term vitality. In your experience, how have you seen peptides complement fitness and recovery goals?
Absolutely. So not only can we utilize peptides to better recover from an inflammation standpoint, from a muscle and a tissue regeneration standpoint, but we can also look at peptides on the other side, giving us more energy to perform movements more often, to increase our frequency of exercise, to increase our duration of exercise. Um, we can look at peptides for increasing muscle mass. If there's a mismatch of hormones, and we are seeing a decrease in, let's say, testosterone. We know that testosterone and muscle mass are very closely linked together. So if we're hormonally imbalanced there and we're having a hard time putting on muscle, utilizing a peptide that might help increase our muscle mass, all of a sudden we are losing more fat because our body is now more metabolically active because we have more muscle tone. We can utilize peptides on the nutritional side so that our cravings for sugar and for those indulgent foods are reduced so that we are more likely to fuel our body with nutritionally dense foods so that we are fueling our body for performance. So you can really look at all facets of nutrition and training and really get a very broad spectrum approach of kind of picking and choosing what we need to address from a training perspective or from a nutrition perspective so that we are optimizing kind of our outputs as well, not just optimizing our inputs and optimizing the things that we're putting into our body, but doing so in a way that we are now flipping the script, and what's coming back out as a result is the best workouts you've ever had, the most muscle tone you've ever had, the most energy you've ever had, and you're wearing your results. When you look in the mirror, you're like, "Ah, I built that muscle," or "I lost that fat," or better yet, both of those things together. And you see those things all coming together, and you see that really well-rounded full spectrum approach yielding a very broad spectrum of results.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that whole broad spectrum because we have GLP-1s for weight loss, and then you can look at peptides like maybe some Somrelin to start building that muscle mass. And I was at one point I was like right in the middle, like I was on tirzepatide, but I lost the weight and I wanted to get a little bulky again, so I feel like Cimarellan helped me get that muscle mass. I'm actually finally toned now, which is like super nice. But someone who's maybe not looking for weight loss or looking to have specific fitness goals, like that you mentioned, energy, because one of the questions that got brought up in the chat was talking about how they took NAD for their migraines. So there's a little going back to that, there's a little bit for everything with all of these peptides that are out there.
Yes, and we also have to remember that the peptide space is new. The peptides or the peptide space for human consumption in a broad spectrum way is new. So there is new information coming out constantly about, we thought that these were the results that you would see from using this peptide. Actually, you're seeing these also, and we're seeing so many new developments in this space literally all the time. And there's so much cutting edge technology that is constantly being brought into the space. And it's a very exciting time in health and wellness because there's there are now so many of these tools to be utilized. These are all tools. There's there's tools that are going to be more efficient than other tools. There's going to be tools that are better suited for your hand size or your project or your budget than other tools. But at the end of the day, our toolbox has never been fuller. And that has allowed myself from a practitioner standpoint to help more people, which is my first and foremost goal of all time is I want to help as many people as I can. But it's also people who have never seen results before or have always felt like they've been labeled as having a stubborn body or that results aren't for them or they just don't have the genes to be fit or they just it's not for them. All of a sudden the conversation has opened up and people who have never seen results before or have had to work 30 times harder than the next person to see a shred of result all of a sudden the script is flipped. And just from utilizing these tools, but we have to remember that there's so much cutting edge information going on here, and there's so much that's changing, and there's so much that's emerging. And so staying on top of research and data is very, very important in this space. And staying excited about it because like I said, at the end of the day, these are all just tools that we are learning how to utilize to best optimize our results.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools out there.
A lot of
And
tools.
yeah, one interesting question that I saw is for someone who's just getting started with peptide therapy, is there one peptide that can be used to build a foundation? But I think maybe we can split it up into different categories, like maybe for weight loss, longevity,
Yeah.
fitness.
I think that for if somebody were to come to me today and say, all right, I want to get started with peptide therapy. Give me your top three, just broad spectrum without knowing anything else. My top three would probably lean towards GHKCU is my favorite peptide. It's going to be it's going to have great utilization, both used topically and injected. Injected, you're going to see systemic inflammation drop overall. And a body that's inflamed is never going to work optimally in any space, in any axis that we're looking at. Weight loss, if we're looking at longevity, if we're looking at digestion, if we're looking at building muscle. If you're inflamed, your body is fighting that inflammation first, and then it is going to be trying to reach whatever goal you're trying to get it towards. So, decreasing systemic inflammation is a phenomenal place to start if you are just getting into peptide therapy. And you can use things like GHKCU, BPC 157, TB 500. Those are going to be phenomenal systemic inflammatory reducers. I saw in the chat copper peptide is next. Love the skincare. Yes, copper peptide for skin and for hair is absolutely phenomenal. It increases the rate at which or the length of time your hair spends in the growing phase, which who doesn't want longer, more luscious, beautiful hair? And for the skin, it's going to help with wrinkle reduction from an anti-inflammatory perspective. It's going to give you that glow. I really can't say too much good things about it. The if I could say one bad thing about GHK is sometimes injecting it is a little bit of a sting. It can be a little spicy sometimes, but I am always going to be GHK's biggest fan over here. So if somebody was just getting started in peptide therapy and they were like, where do I start? Start with reducing systemic inflammation because that is going to help you recover better. That is going to help you sleep better. Sleep is when we're healing. Sleep is when we're building muscle. So that's going to be addressed. And just overall, your body's going to function better and is going to kind of come off the ledge a little bit. So then we can look at, okay, what do we actually need to address now? We've addressed the inflammation. We can see the picture a little bit more clearly. How can we go from here? So reducing systemic inflammation would be my top answer for that.
I love that. I'm sold. Belinda Hobbs says, I want to glow. Me too.
Yes.
I feel like glutathione has prepped me for the little spiciness in it.
A very similar spice level to
Okay,
glutathione.
good to
Very
know.
similar spice. Here's a little insider tip for y'all. If you ever have a spicy injection, and what I mean by a spicy injection, first of all, um, some of the peptides are they just sting a little bit more. Just and GHK happens to be one of them. Glutathione also happens to be another one of those. Glutathione I feel like feels a bit more like a bruise, where GHK is a little bit more of a bite. But you can um, if you can use more reconstitution solution to dilute the concentration of the peptide that can help a lot with reducing the sting or the bite. And if you If it's still too much, you can even go as far as injecting reconstitution solution into the injection site before you inject the peptide. So you are decreasing the concentration in the injection site itself. And those two things, when you're using them together, can really get rid of the bite altogether. So that's a little insider, a little expert tip for y'all. But
Good
it's
to
worth
know. Thank you. And is there any last recommendations that you would give out to someone who's starting on peptides, maybe in regards to nutrition or lifestyle?
absolutely. I think one of my biggest tips would be to be patient. Um, when we start utilizing peptides, we a lot of people have the mindset of all right, I started my injection protocol, or I started my peptide protocol. It's been 2 weeks. Where's my muscle? Where's my fat loss? Where's my glowing skin? Where's my long Rapunzel hair? That lady on the Zoom call said that I was going to be glowing. Where is it? Be patient. Rome wasn't built overnight. Give it a chance to work. And allow yourself to be patient in the process, because if we're looking at systemic inflammation, because we spent a lot of time talking about that. If we're talking about bringing the body's systemic inflammation down, and then we are also stressing about when that protocol is going to kick in and when we are going to see results, are we really reducing our systemic inflammation? Probably not. So allow your body to go through the process of utilizing these peptides. Sometimes that can mean that we see a dip in energy before the energy gets better, because we are clearing out senescent cells that are no longer serving us. So we're going through kind of this autophagy and mitophagy pattern where we're getting rid of bad mitochondria, or we're getting rid of cells that aren't serving us. And we feel kind of down in the dumps. And we're like, wait, I thought I was going to get more energy from this. Let it happen. Let it happen. Allow yourself to be patient. Allow yourself to experience the experience. Be present in it, and and take it as a learning experience. Not every peptide is going to work for everybody. And it's kind of unfortunate, because it would be really cool if it did, but that's just biological fact, that there are going to be things that work better for certain people. So be patient, allow the process to work, and then also be communicative. If you're working with a practitioner, you're working with somebody who's leading you through the process, be very open with that person, and tell them how you're feeling. Tell them how the substances are affecting you, good, bad, ugly, positive, negative, however it may come to you. The more information that you're giving back, the more specific you can tailor your protocol to be. So be patient, be present, and be honest.
I love that. Thank you. I think especially with maybe like Summerlin, oh, you have to do it like multiple times a day in a week. I definitely agree with that. You have to trust the process and be patient. I love it. Thank you
Don't
so
forget your
much.
foundation.
Yes, and the foundation. Thank you so much, Courtney. Is there any last parting information? I know you just gave us that last bit chunk that was so good. Um,
Absolutely.
like where can we find you online?
Yes, there's so many amazing questions in the chat. I'm sorry I couldn't get to them all. My Instagram is Courtney, Courtney_Kyle. Thank you, Brenda. Courtney_Kyle 88. Please feel free to DM me with any questions you might have, any advice that you're looking for, or if you would like to work together. I would absolutely love to help walk you through peptides and getting started on your own journey. Instagram is going to be the best place to reach me, and I'm available as a resource to you all. And I look forward to getting to know each of you and each of your goals, and how I might be able to best serve you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Courtney.